Welcome back to Bitcoin Hard Talk, episode 90, part 3, where we're going to be discussing a proof of weapons network double game. We're going to be covering the Jeffrey Epstein files and what it means geopolitically, as well as the Syria war, and by following the money, what it really means, who all the different players are, how it relates to you in the West, or the different power plays that are happening, and the future of the region as I see it. So let's start with the Epstein files. And this was a strategic escalation by Elon Musk, a big player in the proof of weapons network representing the technology industrial complex. Trump, a politician that also is a business person that mainly aligns with the legacy financial industrial complex of the proof of weapons network. There is a power play and a power struggle. But both of those are controlled by the asset managers like BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, because they have large share positions in all of these companies across all of these portfolios, as well as board seats and the most important voting shares. So this week, let's cover what happened this week, and then I'll go through following the money. And I'm also going to do a little bit of an AI summary because I released a new blog this week on the relationship between Jeffrey Epstein and Trump. I did what last week we did the AI summary of Trump and Epstein and Mossad. This week I'm going to be doing the relationship between Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. And I did a blog on it where you can watch the full thing and a documentary by Ryan Dawson if you want to go deeper, but I'll also play the AI summary. But firstly, let's go through what happened this week. Then we'll go through following the money, the AI summary, and then we'll go through Syria. So buckle up. Elon Musk basically came out this week and said on X, the government's quote, the government must have a list of, I won't say that, RAPISTS. I don't want to get banned on any of my channels, AKA the Epstein client list in their possession. And they must release it right effing now. So, lots and lots of colorful language as we escalated this. Remember, last week, the FBI said that basically the Epstein client list did not exist. Nothing to see here. FBI, Department of Justice, no client list. We don't need to release anything, despite all the contradictions. And this enraged the Trump supporters, even across America. Democrats and Republicans aligned around a shared vision that we don't want, pedos in our country coming after our children for blackmail operations and taking care of the crimes against humanity that are being used through sexual violence in America as well. So the convicted felon, which was the handler of Jeffrey Epstein, the son of Robert Maxwell, the Mossad super agent that engaged in Iran-Contra affair and weaponizing Iran and funding ISIS and Al-Qaeda for Western interests and creating those proxy groups and various other things. His daughter, Ghislaine Maxwell, who was involved in the Bill Clinton blackmail to end Oslo Accords and make sure there was no Palestinian state, as well as other operations. And if you read the book by Whitney Webb, One Nation Under Blackmail, it goes through the funding of the White House and the Clinton administration. And then the Epstein house had that picture of Bill Clinton wearing Monica Lewinsky's dress and the painting, various other things as well. Ghislaine Maxwell, who is in prison, who was convicted, also says that she is willing to speak in front of Congress about the Epstein files. So this creates a very uncertain situation for the proof of weapons network and all of the banksters and financial industrial complex that are all settled. And we know all the different parts of the victims and who they exposed in the banksters and the financiers of many things. So it won't be released, but we seem to be getting this game. And so Ghislaine Maxwell said that she is willing to testify before US Congress about the Epstein files. And that was reported by the Daily Mail. the proof of weapons network control Rupert Murdoch empires that consist of billionaires that are also aligned with Zionist ideology that also control many shares in the proof of weapons network as well, top of the power structure. So media is able to be weaponized as needed. Maxwell said that she's willing to reveal Jeffrey Epstein's client list as well in the same article. And also, it was released that the metadata from the Department of Justice raw Epstein prison footage reveals that despite what the Trump administration said, that approximately 2 minutes and 53 seconds were removed from one of the two video files that was meant to be released, that was meant to be evidence that Jeffrey Epstein hung himself and there was no infiltration. So what we were told by Bundy, that it was 1 minute that was taken out, it was actually 2 minutes and 53 seconds by the metadata. So there's more and more lies. And the video was then spliced basically together from the two files that she gave some reason. In the documentary, I cover all these videos if you want to see that as well, and you want to catch up on all this stuff. That's all on the blog that I'll be sharing in a bit. I'll give an AI summary so that you can catch up quickly if you don't want to do the whole thing. But the cut occurs just before basically the well-known missing minute. And so there's inconsistencies there. This is sending people that are investigating this stuff absolutely doubting and strategically weakening the Trump administration. The Department of Justice has basically came out and said, right, we're going to fire Maureen Comey, who was basically the prosecutor in the Sean P. Diddy Coombs case and the Ghislaine Maxwell case. And so they're throwing the prosecutor under the bus when it's already too late. And they become the fool person, I guess. So we can say they're the person that needs to be fired. There was an article that came out that said Trump allegedly says that Jeffrey Epstein is basically had a letter, and inside the letter there was an outline of a naked woman for basically his 50th anniversary. And that was according to the Wall Street Journal. Trump denies all these allegations and basically saying that this never happened. Quote, he said, I never wrote a picture in my life. Very strange back and forth happening as well. Trump continued to call the Epstein files basically a Democrats hoax, just like Russia. And this was done by Obama. And then he even said it was done by Biden. And he tries to stop himself. So it's incredibly inconsistent despite everything. We covered all of this last week. So, just giving the updates on what happened. Blame Obama, blame Biden, say that the Epstein files don't exist, say that it was a hoax. But this one is sexual violence and victims. And, this is a very serious one. You can't just, have Russia come out on this one. So the Trump base is becoming really, really split. And so what I wanted to do is do a couple of things. I wanted to go into the AI summary of the blog that I created that looks into Trump's background and his background with and connections to Jeffrey Epstein and various other networks. And then after that, we want to follow the money, connect it to what's going on with Musk, and do a little bit of projecting around what we think comes next and what this is really about for the proof of weapons network. And then we'll move over to Syria. So what we're about to play, Azad's going to get it ready. This is an AI summary video, and it's from, if you go to simondixon.com, there's a blog post that's called Is Trump Blackmailed by Epstein? And there you can get the full documentary, the full blog post, and you can find all of the details and source files for anyone that wants to dig deeper into this stuff. So without further ado, Azad, do you want to play the AI summary for the Jeffrey Epstein and Trump AI summary?
Welcome back to the deep dive. So today we're tackling a question that keeps coming up, really, especially with all the interest around the Epstein files still swirling. The question is Donald Trump being blackmailed by Epstein? It's complicated. Our deep dive today is going to synthesize findings from Ryan Dawson's documentary, Trump's Zionist Ball and Chain. It offers a pretty specific perspective on the whole environment that shaped powerful figures like Trump.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is how this source material, it doesn't just look at things in isolation. It tries to weave it all together, systems history. It brings up this concept from Simon Dixon called the proof of weapons network. So our mission today really is to explore how this network is presented, how it supposedly operates, and it kind of prompts you, the listener, to think about what it means when power operates, behind the scenes.
That's a great way to put it. So this proof of weapons network, can you unpack that a bit for everyone listening? How does Simon Dixon's framework say it actually works to keep governments subordinate?
Right. So the framework basically lays out three main tools this network allegedly uses. First, you've got investing in politicians, grooming them early on. Second, there's buying influence, campaign finance, lobby groups, that kind of thing. And then the third tool, if the others don't work, is blackmail. And the Epstein saga, well, within this view, it's presented as a really clear example of that third tool, a control mechanism.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And the documentary, it really digs into the setting for this, right? New York and New Jersey real estate. It describes it as, I think the phrase was, a cesspool of organized crime and corrupt pay-to-play government. Yeah. The argument there is that bribery, blackmail, it's not unusual. It's just how state contracting works. There's even a quote from a consultant saying, in Jersey, you give money for results, not just access.
Exactly. And the source suggests that within this environment, there's a group described as Zionist ideologues. And this group, according to the source, uses its wealth to push certain interests, influencing American money, media, military power. The documentary basically positions this as the world Trump. And also Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, learned to navigate, even master.
Okay, so following that line of argument from the source, the marriage between Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner isn't just personal then, it's presented more like a merger, right? Uniting two big real estate power wings in that NYNJ scene.
That's the portrayal. Jared's father, Charles Kushner, a convicted felon. The source claims his empire was built with some ruthless tactics. He was a big political donor. But the documentary alleges that when, say, bribery didn't work, he resorted to more extreme stuff. It points specifically to his conviction for setting up a honey trap, luring someone into a compromising situation, recording it against his own brother-in-law, because the brother-in-law was cooperating with investigators. And the film also alleges involvement in setting up Governor McGreevey, similarly, which was later used for blackmail. It's presented as a very direct use of that third tool we talked about.
So what about Trump himself in all this? The source seems pretty clear that he's shown as being part of the same world, navigating these networks to build his own empire. Like for Trump Tower, the documentary says he used S&A concrete, which the source identifies as controlled by Fat Tony Salerno, a big name in the Genovese crime family. And his connection was Roy Cohn, the infamous mob lawyer. There are also details about a judge finding Trump conspired using underpaid non-union Polish workers for demolition work, while a MOG-linked union looked the other way. Even his Atlantic City casinos are shown having deep ties to organized crime figures, according to the documentary.
Right. So when you look at all that historical context, these patterns presented in the source, it brings us back to the core question for you, listening. Can someone apparently so deeply involved in a system like that truly be independent? The conclusion drawn by the source material is, well, for this proof of weapons network, a leader with that kind of background isn't a problem. Actually, the suggestion is he's a predictable asset because he already knows the game. He's played it. The documentary asserts the Epstein network itself was created precisely to control these kinds of powerful men. So whether Trump was a direct target or just, a product of the same system that allowed Epstein to operate, the ball and chain, as the source calls it, is presented as real.
So the final thought for you to consider is this. How does understanding this idea, this proof of weapons network, and this alleged historical mix of power, money, influence, how does that change your perception of political independence? Just a reminder, the core research we discuss comes from Ryan Dawson's documentary, Trump's Zionist Ball and Chain, synthesized by Simon Dixon. As always, we encourage you to keep exploring these complex topics with a critical eye.
Okay, hope you enjoyed that summary. So we got two more parts in This Week in Geopolitics. I'm going to do an analysis based upon the assumption, based upon that documentary, and you can go find out the sources and dig yourself around your perspective of what it would mean if Trump is actually compromised and if the proof of weapons network players are also simultaneously compromised, which I believe to be the case based upon what I've learned and following the money and understanding power dynamics. How would you be able to take advantage of that? And that's what I think happened this week in GeoPolitics with the Epstein files. So let's look at the proof of weapons network power dynamics. Let's dig a little bit deeper. So what happened this week? Elon Musk, representing the technology industrial complex of the proof of weapons network and that faction, was completely relentless to push for the release of the Epstein files, as we covered in the beginning section. This is completely clashing with Trump's claim that the client list doesn't exist. So Trump looks like a complete liar. All you have to do, 5G Jess, backward thinking, and question your beliefs. You either believe at this stage that this is Q, trust the plan, and you'll believe anything, or you recognize that there is a level of compromise happening here. And this is really problematic because many different factions that kind of supported Trump now don't support Trump, and you're left with just kind of the radical cultists. That's all that's kind of left, or people that just think there is some codified thing that's happening here. So I don't think that Trump is in charge of the files. Put it that way. If he wanted to release them, I don't think he can release them. And I think Elon knows that these will never be released as well. So if Elon knows that they can never be released and Trump can't release them, then Elon, knowing that the people that are on the top of the chain of the proof of weapons network and the deep state actors can't implicate the financial industrial complex in them, then he also knows that they can never be used, and he can use that in order to gain some strategic power for his agenda. And so I think that this is all that lies into the genuine power play, and what can be used is Elon Musk can fragment for the technical industrial complex the power that Trump has. So even though Trump has been doing a lot for the proof of weapons network, mainly the technology and financial industrial complex, he also has a lot of power because he is one of those cult, he has this cult following, and he's also a wild card. Like, he can say things that are very unpredictable. I don't think he's scripting everything. You can tell the difference when he's reading from the script and he's just going off on his own mode. And so you can use this in order to keep basically Trump in a bit of a survival mode by weakening some of its cult following. And so Elon's call to release the Epstein files, I think they're not about exposing the truth because he knows that it can't come out. He also knows that Jeffrey Epstein was targeting many of the PayPal mafia and the technical industrial complex, as covered in the documentary. It's a weapon to essentially erode Trump's MAGA base and basically pull some of the voters towards his own cause, knowing that Trump is compromised, but it can't be released and Trump doesn't control it. So that gives him a lot of power here. So he's utilizing it while he can. Trump has basically been very loyal to the proof of weapons network, as I covered in This Week in Bitcoin and This Week in Macro. We are full blown into the multipolar world order that I think BlackRock has invested into, and that was covered in previous section. Trump's struggle to basically hold MAGA together draws him closer to being an asset for the right faction of the proof of weapons network. And so basically, this is a proof of weapons network friendly policy implemented by Elon Musk, is how I see it when understanding the power dynamics. And really, the proof of weapons network, they win by both players because Elon's one of the players, Trump's one of the players. They got shareholders in both of the positions. Both of them are doing what they want to do. Some of them are unpredictable. Some of them are less predictable. But if you take away some of the the control, and you can profit from some of the volatility, it's kind of a win-win game in this game as well. So I don't think it's about paying down the national debt, and I don't think he cares about the Epstein files being released. I think it's a power play and a game that basically you've got Trump as the golden boy, and he's pushing deregulation as the proof of weapons network wants. He's pushing the corporate tax cuts as the proof of weapons network wants. He's pushing policies that basically, help their profits, that allow them to consolidate smaller corporation bankruptcies into the large multinational corporations. He's implementing policies that help the multipolar world order. And he's been basically a very reliable proxy for the proof of weapons network in the case of vassalizing the US into this stateless control network. And he's been delivering all of the financial and tech for the financial and tech sectors. But why not be able to control it further, knowing that you won't release this and weaponizing this unique opportunity around the Epstein files? And so, this is because he's a risky bet and he's a little bit volatile. And you don't know, whether he's going to be able to do that. So destabilizing his base and his supporter base keeps him compromised and keeps him faithful to the proof of weapons network, while simultaneously ensuring that he's in line with the different priorities. So I think that's what's happening here. This also aligns with, I shared some posts on X. Make sure you follow me over there. From Evan X, account that I follow that does a lot of these game theoretical work. And then I combine that with my understanding of the proof of weapons network, as well as some of the documentaries and summaries from Ryan Dawson. This is really becoming a team effort to put this together. And then in Bitcoin Hard Talk, I can kind of get ahead of the money and share out what I think is actually happening as well. So I think this means that we're more likely to double down on this multipolarity and the vassalization of America, and that Musk is there to basically remind Trump who's the boss. And while you have power in certain plays, the proof of weapons network has power in the Epstein way, but knowing that it can't be released, how do you weaponize Elon Musk and his X control in order to strategically weaken? So I think that the proof of weapons network has control over the Epstein files, whether that's the Mossad faction, the CIA faction, one of these black op operations that's a subsidiary of Lockheed Martin, whether it's through some of these different operations that are funded by controlling the oil through the Kurd proxies within Syria. But I think somewhere in the proof of weapons network, which the deep state, which is subordinate to the network and a tool of the network, I think that's where the Epstein files are. So I don't even think Elon or Trump can release them. And I don't think they will ever be released. And I don't think it's ever going to happen because those that have the power are implicated as well. So it's just simply a weapon based upon a scenario that can keep basically leaders in check and aligned to the proof of weapons network, on top of the lobby money, on top of the blackmail operations, on top of the various other network. And remember, most people think that when I say Mossad, that means Israel. Israel is controlled, and Netanyahu is just middle management, like Trump is, that have their own power structure, and Israel is a tool for the profits of the military-industrial complex. And so when Zionism is no longer a strategic asset, because you want to dump Zionism for military profits and destabilization campaigns and replace it with rebuild and capital inflows, which is, I believe, the negotiated settlement that we're witnessing in the region right now, then you have to put the case forward that finance makes more money than the lost military, and military gets to make that money up in Europe and Asia Pacific. And so that's what I think is happening with the different power dynamics and following the money, and kind of the game theory, putting together different thoughts and different types of things. So that's the Epstein files part. I hope you enjoyed that and you can start to analyze things. You can go over to my blog if you want more details and you want to see some of the source documents behind some of the things I cover here. But the other big story and the final story for today is what happened in Syria. So there is a lot of things going on that I've been prepping people, but all eyes were on the Syrian escalation. And so if you remember from previous episodes of This Week in Geopolitics, I've been covering over the week that I believe that the negotiations have happened, but there are different escalations based upon things not going to plan and gaining more power dynamics by taking over different territories. But eventually, all the players are moving towards this normalization of the Middle East, negotiations with the different power brokers, with the proof of weapons network, and a movement towards decolonization from the American proof of weapons network, so that forever wars end and eventually we get replaced with this environment of mass growth and mass investment and mass capital inflows. And that was as a result of BRICS aligning with the GCC and the ASEAN countries, and then US having to strategically retreat because it was no longer the global hegemon. And then the GCC buying and doing deals with Trump led to the issuance of stablecoins as discussed in part one, that then changed the macro environment through tariff policies that reset the world order, as we're discussing here. Don't want to go through all of that. Anyway, you can catch up on that in part one and part two. But I was talking about how eventually there is going to be Netanyahu exit, and he's trying to be as useful for the military industrial complex part of the proof of weapons network. And he's negotiating his strategic exit, which doesn't involve going to prison, but does involve probably him disappearing and not being held accountable for his crimes. And he's got leverage that he's negotiating. And that's why this has gone on longer than it should go on longer, and why more people and the genocide is being worse than it should be based upon the current situation. So he's trying to show his full utility to the military industrial complex, which will eventually be exhausted. And then we get the strategic exit, the financial industrial complex takeover, which requires a non-Zionist extreme cabinet government within Israel, a movement towards two-state solution, one-state solution that eventually will lead to vassalization and weakening of Israel, because funds are being pulled, but they're only being invested in distressed assets, which the GCC will buy up on the cheap as kind of the leader in the region for that block, the Gulf Cooperation Council. And then obviously BlackRock and the financial industrial complex want as much deals as possible with the technical industrial complex for their companies, which is why NVIDIA is building up the region with AI data centers. And then there's nuclear program negotiations, which requires Iran's cooperation, which requires Palestinian solution, so that you can harness nuclear energy and become a data center for all of this artificial intelligence. It requires the territorial disputes to all be resolved, and it's going slower than I originally thought. It's getting more aggressive, but I think we're still moving in this direction. Obviously, if the Palestinians get completely ethnically cleansed and the area gets completely taken over, Hamas start resisting, then this analysis would be a point at which we've gone wrong. But right now, following the money and following the power dynamics, I believe that for all the reasons I've covered in previous episodes, that this is exactly what is happening right now. So the next move that I said needs to happen is Netanyahu exit and the strategic destabilization campaign of the Israeli cabinet. So that the MIC can stop essentially, and FIC can stop, the military industrial complex and financial industrial complex can stop propping up Israel, so it can go to the vassalization phase that I just covered as well. So what happened this week? So we had the International Criminal Court chief prosecutor. His name is Karim Khan. And he came out and was basically told and threatened. Remember, we had the blackmail operation where one of the judges in the court case said that Mossad agents were threatening their family and the children, and they had to come out publicly on TV to stop that from happening. But this week, Karim Khan basically was told to, was told to drop the arrest warrant against Netanyahu and Gallant as well. So these are two key players in the cabinet. And if he and the ICC would continue to do that, then they will be destroyed. And so we've had these sanctions that have been inflicted via the proof of weapons network, deep state proxies, via Trump, via the US government. Basically, Netanyahu on the Monday, after doing the delays by attending the White House appointment, he had to attend his local Israeli corruption court charges. And so there was the first sign that he's facing those charges locally. And there was a campaign to make sure his International Criminal Court corruption. So these are his corruption charges and his war crime charges as well. And so I think he's fighting for survival and taking attention away, because the more war there is, the more he gets to be useful, the more profits for the military industrial complex, and the more negotiation power, which is the painful, disgusting process that we're going through right now. Now, always remember, I haven't got my humanitarian hat on right now. When I go through that, I'll tell you at the very end, the disgusting crimes against humanity that are happening right now. Right now, I'm on my analytical, which isn't what I want to happen. It's just analyzing what I believe is happening. And so that the court case was on the same day that there was an escalation. And so what happened? Israel launched strikes on Damascus, Syria. So this is the capital of Syria, a massive escalation. And I genuinely think this caught most people off guard. This wasn't one of those theater pre-warned. This was, I think, out of the plan. And so I just want to give you a quick recap, because Syria is ultra complicated. We've covered it multiple times in the geopolitical section, but let me just give you a bit of a summary so that you can understand more of the complexities and nuances, because Syria is one of the hardest ones to understand, the different factions. So you know that the military industrial complex and the deep state, they fund different groups. So when you hear about ISIS, it's just a rent. It's like, it's a militia as a service and different intelligence agencies. It was created through American wars, funded through USAID. And then Israel and America would use these torture camps to radicalize people and turn them into intelligence assets and have infiltration at the highest level. And by destroying economies and sanctioning economies, you can build these little militia armies that can fight for your Western interest. And then you can pretend that it's like something to do with radicalism for religious, even though it doesn't identify with any of the religious beliefs. So that's how these militia groups works. And many countries use them. Russia uses them through Wagner. Iran uses them through Hezbollah and various other genuine resistance, but also funded. And so therefore, who funds then has to attach their agenda. So you have Qatari interests, you have Iran interests, and America through organizations like MS-23, M13, and ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and various other ones as well. But let me remind you of what's happening in the Syria side, the key players. So there is a militia group, which is a combination of genuine Syrian rebels and a group called HTS. HTS, in simple terms, is backed by the Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC, and Turkey. And so that represents their interests. So when I hear HTS, they'll tell you it's just this group that of Syrian re-liberation. I hear GCC interests, Turkey's interest in the vassalization of Syria. When I hear SDF, which is the Syrian Defense Force, and I hear about the Syrian government, And I hear about the Kurds, which is a leftist, Marxist group of people that don't have a home but are located in Turkey, in Iran, in Iraq, and in Syria. They're essentially backed by US interests. But US in terms of the financial industrial complex, because they occupy the oil in Syria that funds some of the black op operations for their slush funds for weapons trafficking, humans trafficking, and drugs trafficking, American operations, but mainly the financial industrial complex represented mainly by Trump right now. So this is why Trump's talking about removing sanctions, essentially freeing oil, removing sanctions, and allowing Syria to use its wheat. That's being used by American force, which is represented by the Syrian government right now, the Syrian Defense Force, and the Kurds. So you've got HTS, GCC in Turkey, SDF, which is American interests, and the Kurds, which are American interests. Then you have the Druze. Now, the Druze faction off into, they're a different ideology and a different group, but some of them were offered Israeli citizenship and are aligned and were, factioned off in Israeli borders and Israeli citizens. And so some of them hate Israel. Others are aligned with different forces, but there is a militia side to them that represents and are aligned with Israeli interests as well. And so when you think of Israel, you think of colony of America that represents the deep state US military industrial complex, as opposed to the financial interest. And so you've got the Turkey GCC, you've got the US banking financial industrial complex represented by Syrian Defense Forces, GCC and Turkey HTS, and now you've got the Druze and Israel, which is the US military industrial complex. And then you've got a few more regional players, which are part of the GCC, which are aligned with various parts of BRICS, i.e. Russian interest, China interest. And so one of those is UAE, which is in bed with HTS. Remember, GCC, sorry for all of these things. I told you it's complicated. I'm doing my best. And this is their interest, is that they invested in an $800 million deal to develop Tartus Port. And Tartus Port was originally a port that gives access to the Mediterranean Sea that was negotiated between the previous Assad regime and Russia. And so Russia and UAE are kind of in a partnership through strategic investments and normalization. And now with the Assad regime overthrow, because if you've watched previous episode, I believe Iran agreed to that. Russia agreed to that. The GCC agreed to that. US forces agreed to that. Israel agreed to that. And so therefore it was allowed to happen with the way that it happened. But I don't believe that UAE is behind, this current operation, or any of the players, in fact, are behind the current operation. I believe right now, because we're moving to this normalization that requires the end negotiation of the Iran financial industrial complex deals and the Palestinian solution, and then the vassalization of Israel, all into a one-state solution over the years ahead, with GCC being the power in the region. The UAE, as part of the GCC at large, Turkey, Iran, they're all on the same side when it basically comes to Syria at the moment. And so this didn't make any sense. But who is negotiating additional strategic power? Israel. And so Israel representing military industrial complex, and the other groups representing financial industrial complex for the proof of weapons network. And US isn't doing anything because they said desanction. Some of the Kurds forces started demilitarizing, and they haven't sent ISIS in. They haven't sent an Al Qaeda proxy, which is through a disruption campaign via Israel or military-industrial complex. So I don't think that this was planned. So what is this then? So the speculation based upon following the money is that the Druze were essentially in the region that has now been conquered, which is Suwaida. Suwaida is a region within Syria. And basically, it caused a bit of a chain reaction because I believe that there was a resistance between the Druze that are meant to be aligned with HTS, which is GCC and Turkey interest. And so Turkey and the GCC, they need to push back harder via HTS, and they need to push harder on Syria because essentially they looked weakened. And I don't think this was planned, because Israel then came in and saw the opportune moment and said, all right, here's an opportunity. We'll pretend that we're defending the Druze, and we get an additional chance to weaken HTS by essentially hitting some of their military defense, and basically consolidate and secure its own interest in this negotiations between financial and military in the end normalization phase. And so it essentially used this opportunity to immediately, as violence broke out, which I think was genuinely between HTS and Druze, I think Druze were just started to work on their own autonomy and their own interest. And so Israel decided to weaken the HTS and basically keep Syria as fragmented as possible so that it can have additional power, additional territory in the eventual negotiations. And so just so you know, Israel does not give a damn about Druze. That's the narrative. That's how they always spin it. That's how it will always be told to you. But the proof of weapons network and the proof of weapons backed SDF from the financial complex, they're not. They basically have created a bit of a mess here, and it's led to escalation for no point of escalation, and it's a bit unsure about what's actually going to happen next. Now, I do think it moves towards normalization, but Syria essentially is weak, and the SDF has basically we're deciding, are they going to hold the ground? But Israel took over some of the territory. And I think that was to negotiate better terms, as we also give Netanyahu strategic leverage, also a distraction campaign as part of his exit negotiations, which coincided exactly with some of the civil unrest campaigns that we're seeing within Israel. And we'll cover what happened this week as well as the final part. So essentially, SDF, representing US financial industrial complex, their real leverage is essentially control of the fields. It's control of the oil fields and the wheat fields. And it's the fact that they're also backed by the military industrial complex from US that profit from this. So SDF at the moment, they seem to be prioritizing autonomy over normalization, which I think is leading to this uprising, and the regional players need to renegotiate and use some more aggression. And this is not a good sign, basically, because Syria is not looking good. And so I was on Spaces and we were covering all this in real time. But there was rumors that Gilani, the leader, was taken back to Turkey. I'm not sure if that is the case, but it's not looking good. And so that's the current situation that's happening in Syria. And there was an eruption, basically. The Druze resistance inspired the SDF to jump in. Now, the different power factions are not aligned. HTS is fighting the Jews, the Kurds, and then there's all the other different types of groups, because Syria is the most complicated. I just gave you the main groups as well. So I think the GCC need to step in. Israel seemed to be showing more strength and dominance here. So the different negotiations and the proof of weapon network that essentially sees the chaos in Syria this could derail everything. These operations are fluid, and this is a risky part of the operation. And so I think essentially the proof of weapons network is kind of hedging both sides. It's got Israel military industrial complex. It's got SDF financial industrial complex. And it's got the occupation through the Kurds of the different resources. And it can either go through massive fragmentation and destabilization campaign, or it can negotiate with HTS, Turkey, and the GCC, try and get more power. And right, what else have I got for you? So Israel basically jumped in. They started bombing, and they got more territory. They're starting to say the narrative of protecting borders. They do get to protect the borders, but hopefully this doesn't go into chaos, and the leaders in the industry can get hold of their militias and factions and take control of it. But at the end of the day, there are a lot more greater profits in reconstruction, in oil deals. And I believe that forever war is not the model. This is what I think all the players in the region need to get to. And I don't think any of this has got to do with Iran-backed militia. I think Iran has sat back, and they're just engaged in the separate negotiation with the US and what they're going to be doing there. So basically, as it stands right now, I think the Druze, I think the ex-Assadis loyalists and the different factions, I think Israel, I think they're all on the same page at the moment. But Israel's got a little bit more strategic power representing military, more profits. And more death and destruction is the way that this satanic, demonic network works. They get to play both sides while playing the regional players, allow them to figure out the stability and see which one lends up. So I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen next, but we'll keep covering that one. But all eyes are on Syria and what comes next. And I think if we don't have massive changes, next week I'm going to be covering more on the Russia, Ukraine, and China situation as we try and keep up with all these different proof of weapons network plays. So let's go into the final parts of what happened within Israel and whether we're moving on that target. So at the same time as this strategic this escalation, which I think Israel seized upon, even though I don't think it was planned, maybe it was planned, but the cabinet in Israel are being weakened. The reason that was happening is we started to see that within Israel, it's a strategic a cabinet that is aligned. It is a coalition cabinet. And it relies upon different factions all maintaining intact. And two of the major that represent Orthodox Jewish people, that essentially treated, they get to practice their Judaism, they get to be Orthodox Jews, and they don't engage in joining the IDF. They don't engage in the military operations. But they're basically were told that they need to join the army and the IDF through forced constriction. And in resistance against that and in protest against that, two of the parties have basically said that they're going to leave Netanyahu's party, which is the Likud party. And Likud party was connected to all the terrorist regimes and his father that created Israel in the first place, that basically created the terrorism industry. But if these two leave, this is the fall of the cabinet. So I think this is part of the cabinet fall regime that I've been predicting will be coming next. And even if one more falls, that basically takes out the coalition. And the coalition means that the majority would no longer stand, and it would collapse. And so this would need instant new elections, I think, is the outcome from that. So Netanyahu needed a distraction, which kind of lines up with the Syria campaign and the Druze escalating. So one could argue that that's part of what this operation may be. But Netanyahu right now, in order to survive, he needs to show strength for the extremist Zionists that are engaging in all the settler colonialism and terrorizing the Palestinians right now, and conquering more land within the West Bank. And he needs to support that. And that's why we're getting this massively disgusting expansions that are happening there. But at the same time, we're getting the Western exposure campaigns where more and more people are finding out about this as well. So I do believe that this is part of the Israeli strategic weakening into a pariah state, a bit like North Korea, what they tried to do with Iran. And I do think that more and more condemnation around the world. There were meetings where 16 leaders met up to say how they can form strategic embargoes to make sure weapons don't get from America through controlling shipping routes. More and more of that is happening. So it's being strategically weakened into a pariah state. And at the same time, the Syrian president, as a result of this operation, who was aligned with normalizing with Israel, basically came out and said that Israel is seeking endless chaos in the region. So he blamed it on Israel, which most people thought he was a proxy for Israel. And some people would believe that, but I think he is a proxy for Turkey and GCC. He said that over 1,000 confirmed young victim is a shockingly large and tragic number. That's the people that died in this operation as a result of Israel expanding their territory by taking advantage of this. And basically, Israel is now coming out and saying that they're looking to repatriate Druze and expanding their borders. And now Syrian forces are deciding whether they're going to withdraw. Sueda, some of the strategic territory, was now occupied in a ceasefire agreement. And now there's resistance against that ceasefire. And there was a joint statement by basically Saudi Arabia, Jordan, the UAE, Bahrain, Turkey, Iraq, Oman, Qatar, Kuwait, Lebanon, and Egypt. And they quote basically says, it affirms that the unwavering support for Syria's security and unity and stability and sovereignty. And they basically were all condemning and rejecting Israeli repeated attacks on Syria and Damascus. United Nations came out, America came out, Marco Rubio came out. And so all around the world, there was universal condemnation for what Israel did. And Israel also, at the same time as this, started killing and attacking Christian churches within Palestine. And so the Christian community were being bombed. That led to deaths. That led to injuries for the priests and pastors. That led to the destruction of the oldest churches in the region, where Jesus Christ, if you're a Christian, Prophet Isa, if you're a Muslim, and if these are the oldest territories in terms of theological scriptures. And so the Pope himself had to come out and do a call with Netanyahu, warning Netanyahu that Christians shouldn't be targeted. This has happened before, but now the media started covering it, when before it wouldn't have covered it as well. Trump basically came out and made, there was public statement that he's upset when he heard about the Israel attack on Gaza, referring to the Christian attack, even though in Israel, this has happened and they systemically spit on Christians in certain regions as well, and warned that to get Netanyahu on the phone right away, whether that's theatrics, but Netanyahu, and that was a report from Axios, and Axios is kind of Mossad, CIA, deep state control media as well. So more military industrial complex aligned narratives, but you get to see what types of narratives they're putting in, which is consistent with, is this part of the negotiated exit and the destabilization campaign within Israel? Immediately after the Syrian attack, U.S. State Department spokesperson came out and said, Marco Rubio, I believe, that the U.S. does not support Israeli strikes on Syria. I genuinely believe that US immediately sought to stop this as well. And there was a lot more anti-Zionist, messaging that were happening on mainstream American and Western media with podcasters like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owen, Joe Rogan. So I think this is consistent with the next phase of the operation. But I think the Syria side pushed it back a bit. And remember, now I'm going to put, while we put all eyes on Syria, I just want to end with a little bit of humanitarian eyes on Gaza. These are the final power play battles, I believe, between the regional players, the US military, the financial industrial complex, Israel, Iran, Turkey, GCC. But I want to do an end with a bit of humanitarian side, because the genocide in Gaza is getting worse and worse and worse. The starvation campaign, the famine campaign. And I want to remind everybody that WikiLeaks said that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is US backed and executed via Israel because they wiped out UNRWA, which was the organization that was able to distribute food. They did that through their atrocity propaganda, actually done by one of the co-founders of Celsius's wife, Daniel Leone's partner, who works for propaganda and released different articles connecting UNRWA after leaving the Celsius Ponzi scheme scam as well, to connecting UNRWA to October the 7th and then using the atrocity propaganda. Make sure you watch the blog with the AI summary of atrocity propaganda, help you understand what October 7th is. Covered that one last week as well. But now you know what that is. The US basically is opening this Friday just one concentration camp for Palestinians receiving their food. If you watch any of the footage that's coming out, it is crimes against humanity. It's a complete exhaustion campaign, how I feel at the end of Bitcoin Hard Talk, but to a tiny, tiny degree. These are people that are starving, that have been in over 630 days of this, that are completely exhausted, that have been fed lies after lies after lies, that are now going through a deliberate famine campaign by targeting wiping out 70% of all the infrastructure, taking out the working hospitals, deliberately not allowing gas or oil to get to the hospitals that are needed, making the hospitals completely unusable, no ability to cope, constricting aid, constricting water, constricting everything that's needed, limiting it down to bare minimum for survival. And now Palestinians are going through brain damage as a result of this, because of the fact that they're going through severe malnutrition. They're going through severe starvation campaign. We've had deaths as a result of that. And now what's happening on the economic side? Israel sent in their ISIS proxies to, whenever the aid got in, take away the aid, say that's and that's creating hyperinflation. And so there's gangsters in the group that are now taking the aid, selling it on for profit. And the Palestinians that have any money left, they're having to go and beg for external funding. They're cutting off the financial rails. We covered this before. Like, all the Binance accounts were closed in centralized accounts. They wiped out the banks and financial institutions. They're censoring any PayPal campaigns and various other things by using the proof of weapons network. And they're making sure, even in a hyperinflationary environment, that they can't get the money that they need in order to get this. So it's absolute crimes against humanity. This is what backs the dollar. This is the full force of the proof of weapons network. This is the exact cyber campaign of how this works. And they'll give you all the lies and pretend that it's not actually happening. But remember, this is fully American funded, fully backed up by the Israeli terrorists that are inflicting the actual IDF. So IDF actually admitted that they were given instructions to sniper. I put some footage out there of the sniper campaigns. And the people that come to these essential concentration camps to try and get some aid, they either come back completely empty-handed and exhausted, or if they're one of the people that was massacred, they're killed, or they come back completely wounded. That's the reality of this. And that's the deeper meaning behind why I try and expose the flow of money and try and help you understand the importance of boycotting this system. The way that I know how to do it is to boycott the Federal Reserve, which is the source of propping up the dollar by this violence. And you can do that by owning Bitcoin outside the Federal Reserve System. Boycott the BlackRock and the key players of the financial factions of the military-industrial complex by holding your Bitcoin in self-custody rather than holding it with them, giving them more economic power in charging you fees. Boycott the banks by continually owning more Bitcoin each month and playing that 4-year cycle so that by the end of the 4-year cycle, you never look back. Can't promise you future returns, but previously, that's meant you grow more economic wealth so that you don't need to borrow and you can end up buying houses rather than taking out mortgages because the cost of a house when priced in Bitcoin always goes down. The price of a house when priced in fiat currency always goes up. And then when you've got economic power, you might want to use lobby in order to create a next generation of politicians that fight against that power. Or maybe you want to use it in order to be able to engage in strategic boycotting. Use your money for good, become more conscious around what you're doing with your money, spend local, spend on your local farmers. It's good for you, it's good for your health, it's good for everything. And be able to grow more economic power so that you can control the flows of money. If we all do that and we all get more people to be able to understand what they don't want you to understand, which is why I rely upon you to share this content, because I'm heavily shadow banned. We got past 100,000 subscribers. Thank you to everybody that got us here. We need to get to 210,000 subscribers as the next milestone. So if you've enjoyed this content, subscribe, hit the bell symbol, hit all. YouTube will message you every time I go live. Follow me over on X and I'll make sure that you can interact with me in real time. If you send me a message, we'll come up on some of those spaces. And I've got a backup of all the live streams over there. In case we get taken down from those networks, Rumble, we're doing live streams over there. Follow me over there. And if you're into podcasts, you can subscribe, follow my channel, BitcoinHardTalk, on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And finally, in case we get completely censored and they don't want this message to go out on all platforms and I get cancelled, then join my mailing list on simondixon.com. And in exchange, I'll give you access to a newsletter and all the free resources you need to manage your transition in a world of Bitcoin AI and central bank digital currencies. So always remember, you are alive at one of the most interesting and exciting times in financial history. Those on the wrong side of the proof of weapons network are having crimes against humanity committed on them. Those on the right side need to build the economic power in order to be able to change the system. And I think we can do it with as much peace, love, and unity as we can by exiting the system. And so I'd like you to be on the right side of that change. And this was everything I'm going to be covering in Bitcoin Hard Talk episode 90. In part 1, we covered the different acts that are being implemented, the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, and everything that happened this week in Bitcoin. In part 2, we covered the EU destabilization campaign, the Japan debt-based Ponzi scheme, and what it means for China, BRICS, the different regional players, and the US vassalization and artificial intelligence transitions, and everything that happened this week in macro, tariffs, and everything else. In part 3, we covered deconstructing the Epstein files, understanding whether Trump is compromised and how Elon Musk is utilizing that and some of the power dynamics, how that led to the events that happened in Israel, the Middle East, and Syria, and some of the power dynamics that are happening in Syria as after entering into a time of relative peace with atrocities happening, is being destabilized again. And hopefully it gets back on track, because eventually there needs to be negotiation, there needs to be normalization. And I think that's the direction that we're heading to over the months and years ahead. So I will continue, and I will see you this week, this time next week, for Bitcoin Hard Talk, episode 91. And leave a comment below and let me know what you think. I read all those comments and I'll answer to you. Peace.